Ankur, thank you for joining us today. I thought we'd start with asking you if you can share a little bit about your journey and key milestones that led you to become an entrepreneur and founder of multiple successful ventures.
Sure. Thank you so much, firstly, for having me, Gaurav. It's a pleasure. I I've had a wonderful journey, Gaurav, which is not by design. I'm doing something that I was not meant to do. My plan in life was to become a scientist and settle in the US and work at NASA and all of those nice, happy plans when I was growing up. And then I went to the US for my PhD program, spent 2 years there, realized it was not something I wanted to do, came back to India, completely reset my life, and then joined an MBA program. And that 1 year was fundamentally a very decisive journey for me. It shaped me up meaningfully. I then joined management consulting after my MBA. I was management consultant for 3 years. And then in 2009, a really long time back, I became an entrepreneur. When becoming an entrepreneur was nearly not as cool as it is today. And I've been an entrepreneur now for 14 years, loved the journey. And today, I also create content in addition to running startups and investing and mentoring in them. So it's almost like a circle that's come back where I get to give back to the ecosystem that in some way raised me up professionally.
That's great to know, Ankur. And taking it back to before your successful career, can you tell us a little bit about what you gained while studying for your MBA at the Indian School of Business?
Yeah, as I mentioned, that MBA was very decisive in shaping me up. I learned a lot for one big reason, Gaurav, that while an MBA is a great program, and I would highly recommend that program to most people who want to do anything in the field of management or in the field of business, because it just shapes your thinking in such meaningful fashion. But it helped me a lot more because I had zero perspective about the world. I had just dropped out, as I said, out of a program that I wanted to do always. I was a geek science kid who knew nothing about the real world. How does sales work, marketing, finance, IT, HR, anything of that. So for me to spend time in that business school, surrounded by kids who had real work experience, was just such a absorbing time, because all that I had to do was just listen and keep absorbing. I had nothing to offer. And I'm so glad that nobody even took anything from me, because I would have only given away things that were incorrect or theoretical, but there was just such practical wisdom that was around me that I benefited a lot from it, and the self-reflection that came through it. So beautiful 1 year journey.
That's great to hear. And did you take the GMAT for those who are still at the beginning of their journey of becoming successful in their careers? Can we take a step back to talk about your top 5 tips to prepare for the GMAT exam and to succeed at it? Something that you can share from your own personal perspective with us.
Sure. So yes, I did take the GMAT. I took the GMAT twice, and at that point of time, ISB only had GMAT as the entrance. I was in the US at that point, and I took it first without any understanding of what the GMAT is about. By the way, I was like, oh, the GMAT is what has to be given, so let me take the GMAT. And I just went into it, zero preparation, never even looked at a GMAT paper before. Really bad mistake, and I think I scored a 640 or a 660 or something like that. And I didn't even know how to understand that score. So the concept of a percentile or the different sections, everything was alien. It was just such a bad way for me to even understand and appreciate what it was. And then I shared that with the ISB admissions team. Because ISB was a 5-year-old school back then, it was very high touch. It was it was not at the scale that it is today, where it is a established school. Back then it was like a startup. So the people working there were also like, okay, we can help you prepare for the applications, tell you what we're looking for and not. So I sent the score to them. It's like, hey, what do you think of the score? And they're like, you know what, the competition is really high. This is a very, very high intake school in terms of the caliber of students. And we don't think that this score is going to cut it. You're still free to apply, but our recommendation will be give this once more, and you certainly have to improve in every area, whether it's English, whether it's your analytical abilities. And I was like, okay, sure. And that's when I went back and I understood what the GMAT is about. And that's when I took it seriously. So this is 2000, this is 2004 I'm talking about. It's a very different era. So we had books at that point of time, and there was very little online material available. The internet was very young. I had access to it because I'm in the US, but now I was back in India. So I studied the traditional way of how I was taught in school and college. I picked up books and I started going through those sections. I realized that math was easy because I was trained in the sciences, but English was really hard. But English was not about how well you know it, but how well you understand the language in its true sense. So there was a science behind the art as well. And what's the logic? I never saw English as a logic language. I always saw it either you know it or you don't know it. But there are reasons why some words follow some words and some sentences follow some sentences and so on. What is reading comprehension? How do you really decipher what is meant and so on? And it was fascinating. I started to time myself. I took practice examinations. And I think I prepared for intensely about 4 or 5 months, if I'm not wrong. And I retook the GMAT, and this time, thankfully, scoring much better. Again, I didn't know what the thing was. So I asked the ISB admissions team, what do you think I should be aiming for? And they're like, aim for at least a 700 plus. And if you get 720 plus, that's like a great score, because then that sets you up. And you most likely will at least get an interview call. I was like, okay, that's useful. So my goal was 720 because that at least gets me that interview call. And thankfully, I got more than that. So that helped me get that interview and then converted.
And the rest is history. Okay, yeah,
Rest
great.
is history.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And Ankur, tell me, in your podcast as well as in your YouTube channel and other social media channels, you talk about entrepreneurship, startups, and personal growth. With your years of experience, you have likely met a lot of successful entrepreneurs. In your opinion, what are the key characteristics you have noticed in those who have achieved great success? If you could share something on that, please.
Sure. Entrepreneurship, Gaurav, in my opinion, is a really difficult space to be. It sounds really glamorous and it's wonderful. Much like any other thing that you haven't done yourself, the grass is greener on the other side. But only once you get in there, you recognize it's a very demanding profession to be, because it's one massively driven by luck. As much as you would think that it is a lot of skill and a lot of hard work, absolutely. But luck is this factor that you cannot ever organize around you. I can only hope that it works in your favor. What's the market? What are the conditions like? What regulation will hit you or not hit you? What kind of environment will the customers be? How do they evolve over time? And so on and so forth. And that's why, if I look back my 15 years of experience and I try and figure out what's a common thread of people who make it and leave us with the impression that they would have made it any other time as well, there are three things that stand out. Number one is the ability to deal with uncertainty. Because it is so uncertain, you have to have in your DNA, in your temperament, the ability to be comfortable with that. You cannot be flustered when things go uncertain. You cannot be panicking when you don't have an answer and you still have to take a step. You can't be nervous before taking a decision without having all the information that you think you should have, but you have to take the decision nonetheless, because you have to. There is no choice. So one is comfort and a certain level of ability to diagnose and understand uncertainty. Number two, be a very patient, active listener. And when I say listen, I don't just mean listening through your ears. It's listening to observation. It's listening through, of course, your ears. It's listening through absorption. What is the world trying to tell you? The beauty is entrepreneurship is black and white, in the sense that it will clearly tell you where it's working and what's not working. And if you have the ability to listen, you will have the answers sooner or later. So customers will tell you what they like and you don't like. Your employees will tell you what they like and you don't like. Your product will tell you what is working and what's not working. The business financials will tell you whether the business is robust or not. Nothing lies. There is no, I may be losing money, but I may be still a good business. No, it isn't. If you're losing money, you're not a good business and you hope to get better there. If you're making money and you make it sustained, that's awesome, because that's the true merit of it. So you are an active listener. And number three, you cannot do everything on your own. If you want to build a large business, the only way that you move forward is standing on the shoulders of others. And that doesn't mean that you take the credit and never share it. It means that you have the ability to understand how teams work. You have the ability to gather a team around you. You have the ability to raise talent, to identify it, to groom it, to nurture it, as well at the same time, delegate and trust them with what is more important than what you think you could have done yourself. And if you bring these three things together, the ability to deal with uncertainty, the ability to listen actively, and the ability to deal with talent, nurture it, grow it, you have what could be a good mix for you to win. It still doesn't guarantee a win because, as I said, it is a very difficult space to be in, but it will certainly set you up with a higher percentage of success than otherwise.
That's those are great insights, Ankur. Thank you so much, and I completely agree with you. Uh, these are some traits that people should think about before they plan to embark on a journey to become an entrepreneur. Because it does sound very exciting, but yeah, it is challenging.
Yes, exactly.
Great. And we'd love to know if you can share some personal habits or practices that have contributed to your success as an entrepreneur and leader. Are there any specific routines or rituals that you follow to stay focused and productive? Do you think your preparation of GMAT, for example, helped you develop any such habits? If you could share something.
Oh yeah, certainly. I feel there are some habits that just compound beautifully in life, and if you somehow build them early in your career, you will only stand to gain from it. One is not just GMAT, but any other discipline in life, the ability to become a student whenever you have to and whenever you need to. The truth is, and more so in our culture, we believe that education ends once college is over. And like, padhai khatam ho gayi. Now we are free, now we will start working, and now we will just enjoy whatever we do in our life. But that's not true, because if you really think about it, you never really stop learning. And the day you do, it's game over. So you have to constantly learn. But if you're learning in an inorganized fashion, if you're learning in a chaotic fashion, if you're learning in a manner that is not conducive, not laid out for how you best learn, you're going to only learn in a random fashion. And that is never going to be solid. Look at what is the best lesson you have learned from school and college. And when you look back at that, you recognize that there was something that stood out, whether it was a teacher that helped you immensely, whether it was your interest in that subject, whether it was the way that you approached it, the way that you dealt with the problems, the way that you understood the solutions, the way that you deciphered it, your circle around you who was either interested or not interested in it. Lots of things that contribute to what really caught your attention when you were in school and college. And that sets up the way that you learn as a student. I am a firm believer that today's world is so rapidly changing that there is no way you can learn everything at one point and say, I'm done. You just can't. You have to continue learning all through your life. So you need to know what it is to become a student. When I was preparing for my GMAT the second time around, did not go to any class, could not have afforded it, relied on books, relied this traditional way of doing it. I didn't have a circle of friends that I was studying with. There was no feedback loop. There was nobody telling me this is what I'm doing right, not right, and so on. There was no YouTube to rely on to watch somebody else speak about it. There were no podcasts to listen to. There's none of what it is today. And today, learning is just so much joyful because you can actually create a curriculum that suits you best according to your temperament. But back then, what I relied on is, hey, I remember being a student. I remember what it was being a student. I remember what worked for me, what didn't work for me. Let's do this again. And let's just do this again as many times as you can. So number one would be certainly the ability to become a student. That's what served me so beautiful. Because today, if I have to, for example, in the last 6, 8, 12 months, AI has just completely taken over. And for a lot of people, it's completely new. Now you have two choices. You can either close your eyes and be like, oh, it doesn't affect me. Great. I'm just going to turn a blind eye. अब बहुत career बन चुका है. अब इस point पे क्या नया कुछ सीखना है? And you just let go. Or you can be like, hey, this is something which is so wonderful that I need to learn it. And I need to learn it from first principles as if I'm a student again, irrespective of how old or tenured I am. And if you do that, you only help yourself. So number one, that. Number two is the ability to connect with people. I believe that I can only know so much in a lifetime. which will be limited by my ability to absorb, my ability to comprehend, decipher something, and of course, my propensity of knowing something that I do not know. However, the world collectively will always know a lot more than I ever can. So the best way for me is to actually learn from others. And it's a pity when I think of something like books, and I've benefited so much from books because I've been an active reader all my life, that people don't read as much as they used to in the past. And there is an entire generation that's raised without reading books as much as they should. And I often tell them that for the cost of a pizza, like 300, 400 rupees, which is what you would spend on a large pizza from a good chain, you get to learn from somebody's entire life. Somebody's entire life, all the mistake they've made, all the success they've had, everything that they've learned, all of that in a book that will take you 4, 5, at best 6, 7 hours to consume, their entire life at the cost of a pizza. And you would still go for the pizza. That is not how you would want to be. Learn from the knowledge of others, because that way you stand to gain a lot more than you can ever directly. Number 3, and something that I am so glad I get to experience every day, take care of the only asset you truly have, your mind and your body. Don't misuse it. Don't treat it like a dustbin. And I say this hypocritically because that's what I did for the first 30 years of my life. While I had an active mind and I had a positive mind, my health was always something that I compromised upon. I was overweight. I used to eat random things, eat odd hours, never treated with respect. And all of that changed when I went through a medical condition where I had to relook at myself. And today, after 13 years of that episode, I stand a completely changed person where I respect my mind, I respect my body, I respect my soul, and I pay it the kind of attention that it deserves, because that's the only thing that I have. If this is gone, everything else is gone. मैं क्या कर लूंगा पैसे का और ये सब वगैरह चीजें. The only thing that matters is how you treat your mind and your body, and thus your inner spirit. And if you bring these 3 things together, the ability to become a student whenever you want to, the ability to learn from the world as a honest, non-egoistical student, and the ability to take care of your mind and your body, you have the mix. You essentially have the mix to conquer and do anything that you can.
Great. That was so insightful, Ankur. And I'm sure our viewers will also find this very, very useful. Thank you. That was a wonderful response.
Thank you.
And finally, before we wrap up, what are you working on at the moment? What can our viewers expect to see from you in 2023?
I'm working on multiple things at the same time, none of which ever lead to a predetermined result, because that's the design that I have, Gaurav. I'm a person of process, and I love repeatability of something, because I know that that hones the skill and the art of whatever you do. So I have a process in life. I have a process for creating content. I have a process for, say, writing a book. I have a process for meeting people. I have a process for running my startup. I have a process for anything else that I have to do, take care of my health, spend time with my family, so on and so forth. And I just continue to do it without attaching myself to any outcome, any output. So I don't plan my life. I don't have goals. I don't have targets. And I'm not saying this because I've reached this point. I'm saying this because that's who I was all my life, ever since I've known myself. I just work endlessly. I'm a very boring person. I can do the same thing every day. I can eat the same food every day. I can wear the same clothes every day. I can consume the same content every day and learn something new from it. It's just a superpower I have, and I love it. So I just stick to it. And then it takes me to newer directions that I could not have planned for myself. So what am I working on? The same thing that I was working on 2 years back, the same thing that I was working on 4 years back, the same thing, same process. Where has it taken me? It's a surprise. Always is a surprise. And I'm just so grateful for all the directions that life has thrown at me and all the paths that I've walked on, because I could not have planned for any of this sitting back as a student who dropped out of my program, then did an MBA, and then completely changed their life in the hope that it does. And I'm here because something's just worked, and I'm grateful for that.
Great. Thank you so much, Ankur.